We skipped your wedding because it wasn't important. Then why did all 23 of you call after learning my husband controls billions?
All 23 members of my family traveled across the country to watch my younger sister pop a balloon filled with pink confetti. They booked flights. They wore matching clothes. They stayed at an expensive resort in Naples, Florida. My mother spent more money on that gender reveal than most people spend on a wedding. 1 month later, none of them drove 2 hours to attend my actual wedding. My mother said everyone was tired from traveling. My father said the timing was difficult. My sister, Madison, sent me a laughing emoji and wrote, "Maybe next time." There is no next time for a wedding. 34 days later, my phone showed more than 200 missed calls, texts, and voicemails from those same people. They had discovered who my husband really was. Suddenly, 2 hours did not seem far at all. My name is Stella Townsend. I was 31 when I finally understood that distance had never been the problem. At least, I was the problem in my family's eyes. I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia, in a large colonial house with a porch my mother repainted every spring. Patricia Townsend cared deeply about appearances. She owned several clothing boutiques and treated every family dinner like a business event. At the dining table, my mother sat at the head. My father sat beside her and agreed with whatever she said. Madison and her husband, Brett, sat in the center like honored guests. I sat near the kitchen door. That was where I had always sat. Madison was 4 years younger than me. She had won beauty pageants, built a social media following, and married a real estate developer who liked expensive cars and louder opinions. I was a freelance graphic designer. I rented a small apartment in Arlington and drove a used Honda Civic with a dent in the bumper. My mother called my career Stella's little art hobby. Her favoritism began long before my wedding. When I was 14, I won first place in a statewide art competition. More than 1,000 students entered. I spent 4 months painting the Shenandoah Valley. My mother promised she would be in the third row. When I stepped onto the stage, the third row was empty. She had taken Madison to a pageant fitting instead. That night, my art teacher drove me home. I walked inside holding my award, still hoping my mother would be proud. She barely looked up. She said Madison's pageant was coming soon, and that my painting would still be there tomorrow. Years later, I found that painting face down in the garage under a box of Madison's old pageant sashes. I stopped painting after that. Not because I lacked talent. I simply believed there was no point creating something when the people I loved would never look at it. Then I met David. We met in a coffee shop in Georgetown. I was sketching a logo on my tablet. He was reading an old book and drinking plain coffee. He asked if I was an artist. I told him I was a designer. He smiled and said, "That is an artist who knows how to send invoices." I laughed, and he bought me another coffee. David wore flannel shirts, drove a muddy Toyota truck, and said he worked in investments. I imagined a normal office job with spreadsheets and retirement accounts. 8 months later, my best friend Nora showed me an article on her phone. David Ashford was not an ordinary investment employee. He was the founder and chief executive of Ashford Capital Partners, a private equity firm managing billions of dollars. His photo was beside a headline praising him as one of the youngest major investors on the East Coast. I felt as if the room had moved under my feet. When I confronted him, he explained why he had hidden his wealth. When he was young, his father had been betrayed by a business partner. David had watched money turn trusted people into strangers. He wanted to know whether someone would stay when they believed he was ordinary. I stayed. And I protected his secret. I did not keep it because he asked me to. I kept it because I wanted my family to accept him, without knowing what his name was worth. Nora warned me that if they ever discovered the truth, they would suddenly remember how to love me. I told her she was too cynical. She said she was being realistic. David proposed at Great Falls Park. There was no crowd and no photographer. He held my hands beside the river and asked me to build a life with him. I said yes before he finished the question. That evening, I posted a photo in the family group chat. My mother replied, "That's nice, sweetie." 14 minutes later, she changed the subject to Madison's gender, reveal color scheme. When Madison had become engaged, my mother arranged a professional photo session and an 80-person party. For me, she sent one heart emoji. I still believed the wedding would be different. I chose a vineyard in the Shenandoah foothills, less than 2 hours from my parents' house. The ceremony site overlooked the Blue Ridge Mountains. Purple flowers covered the wooden arbor. I mailed 23 invitations. For 6 weeks, no one responded. Then the refusals arrived. Aunts who had flown 5 hours for Madison said Virginia was too far. Cousins who had danced until midnight at the Florida resort said they were exhausted. Madison said pregnancy made travel impossible, although she had flown to Florida at the same stage of pregnancy. My father wrote that he would try. He did not try. 10 days before the wedding, my mother called and told me not to take it personally. She said Madison's celebration had been a real event, while mine was only a small ceremony. I recorded the call. Nora, who was an attorney, had advised me to save every message and every excuse. She told me documentation was not about revenge. It was about clarity. On my wedding day, David's side filled 30 chairs. His mother came. His brother flew from California. Friends arrived from several states. On my side, 6 people sat among 24 empty chairs. The wedding planner offered to move guests over so the emptiness would not show. I told her to leave the chairs where they were. I wanted to remember them. Just before the ceremony, David found me staring at those empty seats. He said, "Their absence is not your failure. It is their loss." During the vows, I looked at the people who had shown up and realized something painful. For 31 years, I had confused family with love. They were not always the same thing. Later, Nora showed me my mother's social media post from that afternoon. While I was getting married, my mother and Madison were having brunch in Alexandria, 2 hours away. My mother had chosen eggs and coffee over her eldest daughter's wedding. That night, I did not cry. I opened my laptop and created a folder. I named it Receipts. I saved every refusal, every screenshot, and my mother's recorded call. At the time, I did not know what I would do with it. I only knew I was finished pretending nothing had happened. 3 days after the wedding, Madison asked in the family chat how my little Pinterest ceremony had gone. My mother told me to send pictures whenever I had time. Brett joked that David's day trading job must be exciting. Then one of my aunts posted vacation photos from Cancun. Only days after saying she was too tired to drive to Virginia, I screenshotted everything. 34 days passed. During that time, Brett's real estate business began falling apart. His company was building luxury condominiums near Virginia Beach. The project looked impressive in brochures, but behind the polished images were unpaid contractors, missing insurance documents, and money that could not be explained. The bank demanded nearly $2 million within 60 days. Brett needed an investor. He contacted 12 private equity firms. 11 rejected him. The final firm had not responded. It was Ashford Capital Partners. Brett had spoken about that firm at Madison's gender reveal. David had been sitting only a few feet away when Brett announced that meeting Ashford Capital's CEO could create generational wealth. Brett had no idea he was insulting that CEO's wife while the man sat beside her. My mother had problems of her own. 2 of her boutiques were losing money. Rent was rising, online sales were weak, and vendors wanted payment. She needed a large cash injection to keep her stores open. Years earlier, I had offered to build her an online store for free. She told me to stick to my little drawings because retail was a serious business. Now her serious business was collapsing. The secret came out on a Tuesday. Brett's business partner researched Ashford Capital before preparing their final presentation. He opened David's company profile and recognized him from the gender reveal. Within minutes, Brett called Madison. Madison called my mother. My mother called my father. They searched David's name and learned everything. The first thing my mother said was not, "We should apologize." According to what later reached Nora, she said, "This changes everything. Call Stella. Be nice. Be nice." Not because they missed me, because they needed access. On the 34th morning after my wedding, I woke to my phone vibrating nonstop. There were 47 missed calls, dozens of voicemails, and more messages than I could count. My mother said she missed me and wanted to have dinner. Madison wrote that David was famous and that Brett would love to meet him properly. Brett left a carefully rehearsed voicemail asking to talk business with David, man to man. The relatives who had been too tired for my wedding suddenly wanted to visit. Only my father mentioned the wedding. He wrote, "I'm sorry. I should have been there." But after 34 silent days, his timing felt less like regret and more like calculation. David sat beside me and read the messages. He did not tell me what to do. He simply said, "Whatever you choose, I am with you." I turned the phone face down. I answered no one. A few days later, my doorbell rang. My mother stood outside my apartment holding an expensive gift basket. She hugged me before I could step back and walked inside without waiting for an invitation. She looked around my small apartment, measuring everything. Then she began talking about David. She said the family wanted to invite us to dinner and get to know him. I asked, "You mean the family that did not attend our wedding?" She waved her hand as if the wedding were an unpleasant detail. She said everyone had been busy. Then she asked how involved David was in investment decisions. I looked directly at her. "You did not come because you miss me. You came because you searched my husband's name." Her smile disappeared for 1 second. Then she called me unfair. I opened the door and told her to leave. Through the window, I watched her walk to her car. Madison was waiting in the passenger seat. They had planned the visit together. When sweetness failed, pressure began. Madison called and said I was hurting our mother. Brett emailed me about a business opportunity that could benefit the whole family. My aunts called me selfish. My father said I should attend one dinner and let everything blow over. I blocked their numbers. They called from different numbers. The same people who had ignored my milestones now surrounded me with attention I had never requested. One night, my mother left a voicemail while crying. She said she knew she had made mistakes. She begged me not to shut her out. For a moment, I almost believed her. I sat on the edge of my bed with my thumb above the call button. Then I called Nora. She told me to open my folder before making any decision. Inside, receipts? I found a screenshot from the week before my wedding. Madison had accidentally sent it to the wrong group chat. It was a message from my mother to the entire family. "Do not waste your Saturday on Stella's little ceremony. She will be fine. She always is." That was why no one came. My mother had not merely missed my wedding. She had organized the absence. I listened to her crying voicemail again. This time, I heard it clearly. She was not crying because she had hurt me. She was crying because I had stopped being useful. The following Saturday, I sat at my kitchen table with David and Nora. I told them I did not want to destroy anyone. I only wanted the truth to stop being hidden. David explained that Brett's proposal had already reached Ashford Capital through the normal process. His analysts had found serious problems. Brett had exaggerated the value of his property. A required insurance bond was missing. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in company expenses had no proper records. The investment was going to be rejected whether Brett was related to me or not. That mattered. I did not want my family to say I had used my husband's power to punish them. Their business problems belonged to them. My decision was simple. I would not rescue anyone. I would not arrange meetings, request favors, or ask David to ignore his company's rules. For most of my life, I had made things easier for people who never made room for me. I was done being the bridge they crossed only when they needed something. 3 weeks later, David was scheduled to receive a leadership award at a major charity gala in Washington, D.C. 400 guests would attend. Nora believed my family would buy their way into the room. She was right. After Brett received Ashford Capital's rejection letter, he panicked. The letter explained that his company's financial risks were too great. He tried to call David directly. The receptionist refused to connect him. Then Brett called my mother and told her that without David's help, he would lose his company, his townhouse, and nearly everything he owned. My mother said, "Leave it to me." Within a week, she purchased a table at the gala for $5,000. She had refused to drive 2 hours for my wedding. Now she spent $5,000 to sit in the same building as my husband. The night before the gala, I stood in front of a mirror in David's Georgetown apartment. I wore a simple black gown. My sapphire wedding ring caught the light. For a moment, I did not see a successful designer or a billionaire's wife. I saw the 14-year-old girl on an award stage, searching for her mother in an empty row. David stood behind me. He said I did not have to speak to them. I told him I did. Not because I wanted a public fight. Because the younger version of me had waited long enough to be defended. Nora brought a slim black folder. Inside were copies of the wedding refusals, screenshots, and the message my mother had sent telling everyone to stay home. Nora called it a mirror. At the gala, the National Building Museum glowed under tall lights. Business leaders, lawyers, politicians, and charity directors filled the hall. David knew almost everyone. People greeted me warmly and spoke to me about my design work. Across the room, at a table near the wall, I saw my family. My mother wore red. Madison sat beside Brett with one hand on her pregnant belly. My father stared down at the table. They were searching the room for David. They did not realize I was watching them. The host stepped onto the stage and introduced David as the founder of Ashford Capital Partners and the evening's leadership award recipient. David stood. I stood beside him. The room applauded. My mother lifted her glass, then froze when she saw me. David gave a short speech about responsibility, education, and using success to create opportunities for others. At the end, he looked at me. He thanked the person who had stood beside him without caring about his money or position. Then he said my name. A spotlight moved toward me. The audience stood and applauded. At my family's table, no one moved. After the speech, my mother approached with Madison and Brett behind her. Her smile was bright and false. She opened her arms and announced how proud she was of me. I kept my arms at my sides. I said, "It is strange seeing you here. Virginia was too far, but Washington works." Her smile tightened. She said they had come to support us. I replied, "You came because Brett needs millions of dollars." People nearby went quiet. My mother whispered that this was not the place. I told her the place had been the Vineyard on March 15th. She had not been there. Brett stepped forward and asked to speak privately. He said he had a proposal for David. I opened Nora's folder and removed one page. It was a copy of Brett's message calling my wedding Stella's little thing. He said the message was taken out of context. Then I showed my mother her own words. "Do not waste your Saturday on Stella's little ceremony. She will be fine. She always is." My mother denied sending it. I reminded her that Madison had forwarded it by accident. Madison began crying and accused me of creating a scene. I looked at her. "No, Madison. Your scene had pink confetti and cost $40,000. Everyone crossed the country for it. I asked for 2 hours, and none of you came. The people around us stayed silent. I did not raise my voice. I did not insult anyone. I simply told the truth. You did not attend my wedding because I was not worth your time. You are here tonight because you believe my husband is worth your money." I know the difference now. Brett's polite expression vanished. He said I could not allow personal emotions to destroy a business deal worth millions. That was when David stepped forward. He calmly explained that Brett's proposal had been rejected weeks earlier because the numbers were bad. The decision had nothing to do with me. Brett stared at him as if the floor had disappeared. My mother reached for my hand. She said, "I am your mother. You cannot do this to family." I pulled my hand away. "You chose which family events mattered. I am only respecting your choice." Madison cried harder. She reminded me that she was about to have a baby. I said, "Then I hope you show up for your daughter in every way no one showed up for me." My father finally spoke. He said he was sorry and should have attended my wedding. For 1 second, I wanted to believe him. Then I remembered when he had chosen to say it. An apology 34 days late, at a gala where you need something, does not feel like an apology. It feels like strategy. I turned away and took David's arm. We walked back to our table. For the first time in my life, my mother had no answer. I did not destroy Brett's company. His own choices did that. He failed to secure new funding. The bank foreclosed on the construction project. His business collapsed, and the luxury condominium site became an unfinished concrete shell near the water. During the bankruptcy process, Madison found the unexplained expenses Ashford Capital had flagged. There were hotel rooms in cities where Brett had no projects, restaurant bills for 2 people, an apartment rented through a company Madison had never heard of. Brett had been having an affair with his office manager for 6 months. He had been lying throughout Madison's pregnancy and during the $40,000 gender reveal. Madison called me at 2 in the morning. For the first time, her voice held no performance. She said she was sorry, not because David was wealthy, because of everything she had done to me. I listened. I did not comfort her, but I did not hang up. I told her I would think about what she had said. One desperate phone call could not erase decades of favoritism. But it was the first honest thing I had heard from my sister in years. My mother's boutiques continued failing. 2 locations closed when she could not afford the new rent. A third followed months later. The painful irony was that the online business she had mocked me for suggesting might have saved her years earlier. She never apologized for dismissing me. Instead, she called and asked whether David would review her business plan. That told me she still did not understand. My father also lost important clients. One of them had attended the gala and heard enough of our conversation to question his judgment and integrity. The consequences spread through the family, but I did not celebrate them. Revenge feels powerful in imagination. In real life, watching people fall can still hurt, even when they built the stairs themselves. 3 weeks after the gala, I returned to my small Arlington apartment and wrote 5 letters by hand. 1 for my mother, 1 for my father, 1 for Madison, 1 for Brett, 1 for the extended family. I wrote that I was not acting from anger but from clarity. For 31 years, I had tried to become smaller, quieter, and easier to love. Nothing worked. They crossed states for a gender reveal. They would not cross 2 hours for my wedding. They discovered my husband in 34 days. They had never truly discovered me in 31 years. I wished them well, but I told them I would no longer attend dinners, holidays, or conversations designed to gain access to David. I wrote one final line. This is not punishment. This is peace. I mailed the letters, changed my phone number, and blocked the remaining accounts. Nora became the only person allowed to contact me for a real family emergency. That evening, David and I stood on his balcony overlooking the Potomac. The city lights reflected on the water. For the first time in my life, I was not waiting for anyone to arrive. The silence did not feel empty. It felt safe. 6 months later, Brett's bankruptcy was complete. His company no longer existed. Madison filed for divorce after discovering the affair and hidden debt. She gave birth to a daughter named Hope and moved back into my parents' house. My mother's social circle disappeared as quickly as her money. Friends who had praised her parties stopped calling when she could no longer host them. My father downsized his consulting business. He sent a letter through Nora. He did not ask for money. He only asked to speak with me. I kept the letter, but I did not answer. A boundary does not have to be permanent to be real. It only has to protect you for as long as you need it. My life moved forward. The director of the charity foundation had spoken with me at the gala about my portfolio. She hired me to redesign the organization's national education campaign. It became the largest project of my career. I earned it because of my work, not because of David, not because of my family name. David and I bought a house in the Virginia countryside, far enough from Falls Church to feel peaceful, but close enough to remember where I came from. The house had a bright sunroom. I turned it into an art studio. Then I went back to my parents' garage and recovered the Shenandoah painting I had made at 14. The frame was scratched. Dust covered the canvas. But the valley was still there. The mountains were still blue. The light still fell across the trees exactly as I had painted it. I cleaned it carefully and hung it above our fireplace. It had waited 17 years for a wall. I had waited just as long to believe I deserved one. Months after the gala, Nora brought me a card from Madison. It was handwritten. Inside was a photograph of baby Hope with dark hair, round cheeks, and wide eyes. On the back, Madison had written, "She has your eyes." The card said she had named her daughter Hope because she wanted to become a different kind of mother. She did not demand forgiveness. She did not ask for money. She said she would wait as long as necessary. I placed the photograph on my studio desk. I did not call her. I did not throw it away. That difference mattered. David saw the picture later and said the baby was beautiful. I agreed. Then I said I hoped Madison would give her daughter the one thing we had both needed. Someone who showed up. For years, I believed forgiveness meant reopening every door. It does not. You can forgive someone and still keep your distance. You can hope they change without volunteering to be hurt while they practice. A boundary is not always a wall. Sometimes it is a gate, and the person who built it is allowed to hold the key. Madison might truly change. My father might one day apologize without needing anything. Even my mother might eventually look at her life and understand what she traded away for appearances. But I could no longer build my peace around their potential. I had done that for too long. I am sitting on my porch as I tell this story. It is late autumn in Virginia. The trees are copper and gold. The Blue Ridge Mountains rest along the horizon like a faded watercolor. David is inside making pasta with lemon and capers, the same meal he made on the night my family began calling from new numbers. My phone is quieter now. The family group chat is gone. The Sunday dinners are gone. The chair near the kitchen door is gone because I finally stood up and left the table. Sometimes I look at the painting above our fireplace. I remember the girl who created it. She believed she needed an audience to prove that her work mattered. She believed an empty third row meant she had failed. She was wrong. The people who fail to show up do not get to measure your worth. My mother once told me my wedding was not a real event. In one way, she was right. It was not a performance. There were no matching outfits, no cameras flying overhead, and no $40,000 balloon. It was a promise between two people who had chosen each other honestly. The people who needed to witness it were the ones who came. I did not win because Brett lost his company. I did not win because my mother lost her boutiques, or because the truth embarrassed them at a gala. I won when their calls stopped controlling my heartbeat. I won when I stopped explaining why I deserved basic love. I won when I looked at 24 empty chairs and understood that emptiness can be evidence. Most of all, I won when I learned that being related to someone does not give them permanent access to your life. Love is not appearing when money is involved. Love is not sending flowers after ignoring the ceremony. Love is not calling someone strong because you plan to leave them alone with every burden. Love shows up, and when it cannot show up, it tells the truth. My family discovered who my husband was in 34 days. But by then, I had finally discovered who I was. I was not the forgotten daughter. I was not the chair near the kitchen. I was not a small artist with a little hobby. I was a woman who had survived years of being overlooked and still knew how to create something beautiful. The bravest thing I ever did was not confronting my family in a room full of powerful people. It was waking up the next morning, seeing a silent phone, and realizing I did not miss the noise. For the first time, I had stopped waiting for them to choose me. I had chosen myself, and that was the moment the empty chair finally became a throne. Disclaimer: this story is written for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, businesses, places, or events is coincidental.